You see, I thought love was unconditional. I thought sacrificing for your children was what mothers did. But after 58 years on this earth, I finally learned the truth. Love has a breaking point. And once it breaks, there's no gluing it back together. Not with tears, not with apologies, not with desperate phone calls when they suddenly need something. If you stay until the end, you'll understand why I let the bridges burn instead of rushing to put out the flames. And maybe, just maybe, you'll think twice before taking for granted the person who would move mountains for you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The cake felt heavy in my arms as I climbed the stairs to Steven's apartment. Heavier than it should have. Proudest mom, written in blue frosting, his favorite color since he was 5. The same blue as the toy car I'd worked double shifts to buy him for Christmas that year. My feet ached from standing at the airport, then the bus station, then walking 6 blocks because I wanted to save the Uber money for his graduation gift. 10 hours of flying economy, my knees pressed against the seat in front of me, all to surprise my only son on his big weekend. The weekend he'd told me, quite firmly, that I couldn't attend because there weren't enough tickets. The weekend that marked the culmination of the education I'd been paying for, one painful withdrawal at a time, from my retirement fund. "It'll be live-streamed, Mom," he'd said during our last call, his voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "Save your money. Don't make a big deal." But mothers make big deals of their children's achievements. It's what we do. So I'd saved, scrimped, eaten microwave dinners for months to afford this trip. To afford the generous check folded in my purse that would help him start his life after college. $20,000, nearly everything I had left after paying for his education. I heard the laughter before I reached his door. Young voices, glasses clinking. A party. How perfect, I thought. Everyone would be there to witness his surprise. My hand hesitated at the door. A flicker of something, intuition perhaps, making me pause. But I dismissed it. This was Steven, my boy. The one good thing I'd done in this world? The door wasn't fully closed. It drifted open an inch when I tapped it with my foot, my hands full with the cake and a small suitcase. That's when I heard him. Clear as day. My son's voice, the one I used to listen for when he'd cry in the night. I told her I couldn't afford tickets for family. She's embarrassing, honestly. Shows up to everything in those same 3 outfits she's had since I was in high school. Laughter bubbled around him. God, can you imagine her here? Taking pictures every 5 seconds? Asking all my professors if I'm doing okay? A female voice chimed in. One I recognized from the few video calls he'd allowed over the years. Julia, his girlfriend. Is she sending money for graduation at least? Oh yeah, Steven said, his voice dropping to that conspiratorial tone he'd used since he was a teenager planning mischief. She thinks I'm struggling, so she's sending a little something to help. Last time she did that, I got this watch. More laughter. I stood frozen, the cake suddenly unbearably heavy in my arms. Your mom's kind of a sucker, someone else said. Tell me about it, my son replied. She's been bailing me out since freshman year. I just feed her some line about textbooks or rent increases and boom, she's emptying her savings account. The world tilted slightly. I looked down at the cake, its cheerful blue letters blurring before my eyes. Not from tears. No, something else was happening. Something hardening inside me where softness had lived for 58 years. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room fell silent. 6 faces stared back at me. Young, beautiful, horrified. Steven stood in the center, a glass of something amber in his hand, his mouth hanging open. The watch he'd claimed he needed for professional interviews glinted on his wrist, a $600 expense I'd covered by taking an advance on my credit card. I didn't speak, didn't cry. I simply walked to the kitchen counter, set down the cake with deliberate care, and turned to leave. Mom, Steven stepped forward, his face draining of color. I held up my hand. The gesture silenced him more effectively than any words could have. Then I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. My hotel room was sparse but clean. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall for what felt like hours. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Steven, calling, texting. leaving voicemails that I couldn't bring myself to listen to. What could he possibly say? That he didn't mean it? That it was just a joke? The truth has a particular sound when you hear it. It rings differently than lies or excuses. I'd heard the truth in my son's laugh, in the casual way he'd dissected our relationship for his friend's amusement. I thought of all the nights I'd lain awake, worrying about him. The promotions I'd turned down because they would have meant moving him to a new school. The men I hadn't dated because Stephen had disliked them. The retirement fund that had dwindled to almost nothing because Stanford was his dream school. And dreams matter, don't they? But not my dreams. Never mine. I picked up my phone and booked a flight. Not back home to my empty house in Chicago, where everything would remind me of the son whose photos filled every surface. No. Somewhere I'd always wanted to go but had denied myself because there was always something Stephen needed first. The Maldives, white sand beaches and clear blue water, a place where no one knew me as Stephen's mom or that woman who worked so hard for her son. Just Clara. Just me. I canceled my hotel reservation, packed my small suitcase, and caught a taxi to the airport. The $20,000 check stayed in my purse. By morning, I was on a plane, watching California shrink beneath me until it disappeared altogether. The first week in the Maldives passed in a blur of sunlight and salt water. I rented a small bungalow that stretched out over the ocean, another dream I'd filed away for someday. I swam in water so clear I could see tiny fish darting around my legs. I ate meals without calculating the cost, or wondering if I should save half for tomorrow. I slept without setting an alarm. My phone remained off. Whatever Stephen was saying, the excuses, the explanations, the inevitable requests for understanding and forgiveness, I didn't want to hear them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. On my 10th day in paradise, curiosity finally got the better of me. I turned on my phone, bracing myself for the barrage of notifications. They were there. Dozens of texts, missed calls, voicemails. I skimmed the texts, watching them evolve from frantic apologies to anger to, finally, what I had been expecting all along. Mom, I hate to ask, but I'm in a really tight spot. The security deposit for my new apartment is due, and without your graduation gift, I can't cover it. Can you help? Just this once? Just this once. How many just this once moments had there been over the years? Hundreds, probably. Each time I'd told myself it was what mothers did. We help, we provide, we sacrifice. I looked out at the endless blue horizon, at the life I was finally allowing myself to have. Then I turned off my phone without replying and walked into the warm ocean, letting the salt water wash away decades of thankless devotion. That night, as I sipped a cocktail on my private deck, watching the stars reflect on the water below, I made myself a promise. I would never again set myself on fire to keep Stephen warm. The flames had finally reached my own heart, and in their scorching heat, something new was being forged. Something harder, colder, something that understood at long last that love without respect isn't love at all. It's exploitation. And I was done being exploited. 2 weeks stretched into 3. I extended my stay in the Maldives, moving to a slightly less expensive bungalow that still offered the luxury of waking to the sound of gentle waves. Every morning, I swam in the impossibly blue water. Every evening, I dined alone, savoring each bite without rushing to check if someone else needed something from me. The emails from Stephen continued, each one more desperate than the last. Mom, please respond. I don't understand why you're doing this. Mom, the landlord won't wait any longer. I'm going to lose the apartment if I don't get the deposit by Friday. Mom, they're threatening to take legal action. Please, I'm sorry for whatever you think you heard. It wasn't what it sounded like. I read them all with a strange detachment, as if they were written to someone else. Some other mother who still believed in the fiction of maternal obligation. On my final night in paradise, I composed a single reply. Stephen, I heard exactly what you said. I heard the truth in your voice when you called me embarrassing. When you mocked the clothes I wore because I spent my money on your education instead of my wardrobe. When you bragged about manipulating me for cash. I heard it all. The money you're asking for? The money you expected as your graduation gift funded my trip instead. I've decided to invest what's left in myself. For the first time in 30 years, I choose me. I didn't add, I love you. The words felt hollow, a reflexive platitude that no longer matched the reality of what existed between us. After hitting send, I blocked his email address. Then I booked a flight back to Chicago, not because Steven needed me, but because I had a life to rebuild. A life without the constant drain of a son who saw me as nothing more than an ATM with maternal instincts. My house felt smaller when I returned, dusty and unlived in despite my absence of only a month. I'd never decorated it to my taste. It had always been Steven's home first, filled with his trophies, his preferences, his needs. Even after he left for college, I'd maintained it as a shrine to his childhood and a landing pad for his occasional visits. No more. I spent the first day back cleaning, not just dusting and vacuuming, but purging. I took down the gallery wall of Steven's school photos, packed away the participation trophies I'd proudly displayed for years, emptied his bedroom of everything except the furniture, which I would sell. With each item I removed, my breathing became easier. It was like clearing not just physical space, but emotional weight. By nightfall, 3 large boxes sat by the door, ready for donation. Steven's childhood had been carefully erased from my home. The phone calls started the next day. First came Julia, Steven's girlfriend. I let it go to voicemail. Mrs. Wilson, it's Julia. Steven's really struggling right now. He lost the apartment because you... A pause, as if reconsidering her approach. He's staying on our couch, but it's not sustainable. He says you aren't answering his emails. Please call him back. He's your son. I deleted the message. Then came calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Steven's friends, I assumed, enlisted to wear down my resolve. I blocked each one methodically. Finally, the call I'd been expecting. My sister, Diane. Clara, what on earth is going on? Steven called me in tears saying you've cut him off completely. On his graduation of all times. I settled into my newly purchased armchair, a deep emerald green that I'd always wanted, but Steven had called old lady furniture. I overheard him mocking me to his friends, I said, my voice calm and factual, laughing about how he manipulates me for money, calling me embarrassing. Oh, Maggie, Diane's voice softened. Kids say stupid things. You know he loves you. No, I replied. He loves what I provide. That's different. So you're punishing him? For being young and thoughtless? Come on, that's not the sister I know. The Clara I know forgives. She understands that family is everything. I smiled, though Diane couldn't see it. This was exactly what I'd expected. The appeal to family, to forgiveness, to the maternal instinct to smooth things over at my own expense. The Clara you knew allowed herself to be exploited, I said. She doesn't live here anymore. He's your only child. Your flesh and blood. Diane's voice rose with each word. Are you really going to throw away 30 years of love over one stupid comment? It wasn't one comment. It was a revelation of who he truly is. And who I've been. I paused, feeling the weight of my next words. I'm not throwing away anything, Diane. I'm simply recognizing what's already been lost. I ended the call before she could respond, knowing any further conversation would just be variations on the same theme. My obligation to forgive. My duty to understand. The expectation that I would eventually relent because that's what mothers do. Not this mother. Not anymore. That night, I drafted emails to the 3 charities I'd researched during my flight home, organizations that supported single mothers pursuing education. I divided the remaining graduation gift money, $15,000 after my Maldives trip, equally among them. The donations were made in my name, not Steven's. This money would help women who were struggling as I once had, who deserved a chance to build something for themselves. I slept soundly for the first time in years. The next morning, I woke to find Steven on my doorstep. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing wrinkled clothes that suggested several nights on someone's couch. "Mom?" he said, his voice breaking. "Please. I've been calling and emailing for weeks." I stood in the doorway, neither inviting him in nor stepping outside to meet him. The physical boundary felt important. I have nothing to say to you, Stephen. Mom, please. Tears welled in his eyes. I know what I said was awful. I was just showing off for my friends. It didn't mean anything. That's the problem, I replied. I meant nothing to you, except as a resource to be tapped whenever you needed something. He ran his hand through his unwashed hair. That's not true. I love you. I've always loved you. Love is demonstrated, Stephen. It's not just a word you use when you want something. His expression hardened slightly. So that's it? 30 years of me being your son erased because of one mistake? One mistake? I raised an eyebrow. The mistake was mine, thinking that my love and sacrifice would be met with respect. I won't make that mistake again. What am I supposed to do now? He asked, desperation edging into his voice. I have nowhere to live, no money for a deposit. You're a college graduate, I interrupted. Figure it out. I closed the door on Stephen's stunned face, my hand steady, my heart unmoved by his tears. Through the window, I watched him stand there for several long minutes, as if waiting for me to change my mind, to rush out and embrace him as I'd done countless times before. When he finally turned away, shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt nothing but a cool sense of justice. That evening, my doorbell rang again. This time, it was Christopher, Stephen's father, my ex-husband who had walked out when Stephen was 8, leaving me to raise our son alone while he started a new family in Colorado. Clara, he said, his voice carrying that forced pleasantness I remembered so well. 20 years older, but still handsome in that privileged way of men who've never had to worry about retirement funds or second jobs or children's tuition. We need to talk about Stephen. I almost laughed. We? There hasn't been a we regarding Stephen since 2003. Christopher shifted uncomfortably on my porch. He called me. He's in trouble. Funny how that works, I replied. He ignores you for years, then suddenly needs to reconnect when he's desperate. Can I come in? He gestured to the house behind me, the house he'd left, the mortgage I'd struggled to pay on my own for 2 decades. No. The simplicity of refusal felt exhilarating. Whatever you have to say, you can say from there. Annoyance flickered across his face. Christopher wasn't accustomed to women denying him entry to spaces he considered rightfully his. Look, Clara, I know you're upset about something Stephen said. He told me what happened. Kids say thoughtless things. Did he tell you what he said? The exact words? I interrupted. Did he tell you how he laughed while describing how he manipulates me for money? How he mocks my clothes? Clothes I wear because I've spent every extra penny on his education? Christopher had the decency to look uncomfortable. He mentioned there was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was clarity. For the first time in 30 years, I saw my son for who he truly is. I crossed my arms. And now, suddenly, you're involved? After contributing the absolute minimum in child support and emotional support? That's rich, Christopher. I'm here now, he said, as if his presence on my porch was some grand gesture deserving of gratitude. Yes, because Stephen needs something. That's the only time either of you thinks of me, when I'm useful. I shook my head. I'm not useful anymore. I'm done. He's your son, Christopher said, his voice hardening. Your only child. You can't just abandon him because your feelings got hurt. I met his gaze directly. I didn't abandon him. I stopped enabling him. There's a difference. He needs help with his apartment deposit. Then help him, I cut in. You're his father. You have a well-paying job, a comfortable life. You've contributed almost nothing compared to what I've given. It's your turn. Christopher's expression shifted, uncomfortable recognition dawning in his eyes. I can't just... My wife and I have the twins' college to think about. Exactly, I said, allowing a small, cold smile. It's different when it's your money, isn't it? When it's your retirement at stake? When it's your sacrifice being demanded? He had no response to that. Goodbye, Christopher. I closed the door for the second time that day, feeling the same quiet satisfaction. Through the window, I watched him make a call, to Stephen, no doubt, reporting his failure to sway me. I wondered what excuse he would give for not opening his own wallet. Men like Christopher always had reasons why their money should stay their money. while women like me were expected to give until there was nothing left. The following week passed in a blur of activity. I contacted a realtor about selling my house. It was too big for just me, filled with memories I no longer wanted. I updated my resume, applying for positions that would challenge me rather than merely pay the bills. I made an appointment with a financial advisor to see if I could salvage some kind of retirement from what remained of my savings. I was in the middle of sorting through kitchen cabinets when my phone rang. Julia again. This time, I answered. "Mrs. Wilson," she began, her voice carrying that careful politeness of someone approaching a dangerous animal. "I'm calling because I'm worried about Stephen." "I'm not," I replied simply. She seemed taken aback by my directness. "He's really struggling. He lost the apartment. He's had to delay his job start date because he doesn't have a permanent address. He's sleeping on our couch, but my roommates are getting frustrated." "That sounds difficult for everyone involved," I said, continuing to sort through mismatched Tupperware as we spoke. "He needs his mother," Julia pressed. "Everyone needs their mom sometimes. What Stephen needs is consequences," I corrected her. "He's experiencing them now." "But, Julia," I interrupted gently, "you're young. You think love means rescuing someone from the results of their own actions? It doesn't. Sometimes love means letting them face those results so they can grow." "This isn't love," she said, her voice hardening. "This is punishment." "No," I replied. "This is reality. Stephen has spent years believing he could treat me however he wanted without repercussions. That world no longer exists." She was quiet for a moment. "He says you donated the money that was supposed to be his graduation gift." "I did," I confirmed. "To organizations that support women who remind me of myself 30 years ago. Single mothers trying to build better lives while raising children alone. That money was meant for Stephen," she insisted. "No," I corrected her. "That money was mine. Every dollar earned through my labor, saved through my sacrifice. I chose to redirect it to people who might appreciate it." Julia's tone changed, growing colder. "You know, he was right about you. You're not the saint you pretend to be." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "I never claimed to be a saint, Julia. Just a woman who finally understood her own worth." I ended the call and continued with my sorting, feeling lighter with each item I discarded. That night, I received a text from an unknown number. "Mom, I'm using Julia's phone since you blocked mine. Please, I need help. Dad won't do anything. I'm sleeping on a couch. The job I was supposed to start is threatening to rescind their offer if I don't have a permanent address soon. I know I messed up, but isn't this punishment enough? I'm your son, your only family. Please." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the weight of those words. Your only family. How skillfully he wielded guilt, even now. How expertly he positioned himself as my sole connection to love and belonging. I blocked Julia's number without replying. Family, I had come to understand, was not about biological connection. It was about respect, about mutual care, about seeing someone's sacrifice and honoring it rather than exploiting it. By that definition, Stephen had not been family to me for a very long time, and I was finally free to admit it. 3 months passed. My house sold quickly. The real estate market in Chicago was hot, and despite the dated kitchen and bathrooms, the location attracted multiple offers. I found a sleek one-bedroom condo downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Lake Michigan. It was modern, minimalist, and had absolutely no space for adult children who might need to move back home temporarily. I used some of the house proceeds to fund a long-overdue kitchen renovation in the condo. The rest went into my newly established retirement account, carefully managed by a financial advisor who didn't flinch when I explained that under no circumstances was my son to have access to any of my assets. I had my will rewritten, designating my entire estate to the charities I'd come to support. My new job at a boutique marketing firm catering to women-owned businesses energized me. For the first time in decades, I was using my creative talents without apology or constraint. My colleagues were mostly younger, women in their 30s and 40s who treated me with genuine respect, rather than the patronizing tolerance I'd grown accustomed to in my previous workplace. On a crisp October evening, I was having dinner at a new restaurant near my condo when I felt a presence at my table. I looked up to find Diane standing there, her expression a mixture of determination and discomfort. "Clara," she said, settling into the chair across from me without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." I took a sip of my wine, a Cabernet I'd chosen because I enjoyed it, not because it was the least expensive option on the menu. "About?" "You know about what?" Diane replied, lowering her voice. "About Stephen. This has gone on long enough." I set down my glass. "Has it?" I wasn't aware there was a standard timeline for responding to betrayal. Diane's lips thinned. "He made a mistake." "One mistake, and you've punished him far beyond what's reasonable." "Have I?" I cut a piece of my steak, perfectly medium rare. "Tell me, what would be a reasonable response to discovering your only child has been mocking and exploiting you for years? A conversation, setting boundaries, not—" She gestured vaguely around the restaurant, at my new clothes, my new haircut, my new life. "This complete erasure of him from your life." "I didn't erase him," I corrected. "I simply stopped centering my life around him. There's a difference." Diane leaned forward. "He lost the job offer, Clara, because he didn't have a permanent address. He's working at a call center now, living in a shared house with 5 other people. Do you know how humiliating that is for him? After graduating from Stanford?" I felt not even a flicker of sympathy. "Sounds like he's experiencing the real world, the one I've lived in for decades while making sure he never had to." "He's your son." "So you keep reminding me," I replied, as if that biological connection entitles him to eternal financial support and unconditional forgiveness. Diane's eyes widened slightly. "You really have changed." "Yes," I agreed. "I have. For the better. He's depressed, Clara. He barely leaves his room except for work. This revenge, whatever you think you're doing, it's gone too far." I put down my fork and knife, giving Diane my full attention. "Let me be very clear. This isn't revenge. This is consequences. For 30 years, I was a resource to be tapped, a safety net to be taken for granted. That period of my life is over. So you're just done with him? Forever?" I considered the question. "I don't know. That depends on Stephen, doesn't it? Whether he ever develops the capacity to see me as a person with my own needs and dignity, rather than a maternal ATM. He's trying to reach out, to apologize properly. From what you've said, he's trying to improve his situation. That's not the same thing as genuine remorse." Diane shook her head. "I don't recognize you anymore, Clara." I smiled. "Funny. I'm just beginning to recognize myself." After Diane left, I finished my meal in peaceful solitude, my conscience clear, my resolve unshaken. The following week, a package arrived at my office. Inside was a leather-bound journal with a handwritten note. "Mom, I don't know if you'll read this, but I'm trying anyway. Inside this journal are letters I've written to you every day for the past month. They start with anger, I'm being honest, then move through confusion and finally arrive at understanding. I was wrong. Not just in what you overheard that day, but in how I've treated you for years. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking to move in with you. I'm just asking you to read these pages, to see that I'm trying to understand what I did. Stephen." I took the journal home but didn't open it immediately. Instead, I placed it on my coffee table and went about my evening routine. A glass of wine on my balcony, watching the sunset over the lake, followed by a long bath in my newly renovated bathroom with its rainfall shower and soaking tub. Only after I was settled in bed did I finally reach for the journal. I opened it with steady hands, neither eager nor reluctant, simply curious about what Stephen might have written when desperate manipulation had failed. The first entries were exactly as he'd described. Angry, accusatory, full of phrases like, "It's not fair," and "You've destroyed my life, and what kind of mother does this?" I read them with detached interest, noting how he positioned himself as the victim, me as the villain. By the middle of the journal, the tone shifted. The entries became shorter, more reflective. Questions rather than accusations. "Did I really treat you that badly? Were you always just a bank account to me? Why didn't I ever notice how tired you looked?" The final entries showed glimmers of something that might have been genuine introspection. He wrote about remembering instances when I'd skipped meals so he could have new soccer cleats, when I'd worn the same winter coat for a decade while buying him a new one each year as he grew, when I'd fallen asleep at his debate tournaments after working double shifts. The last page held a single paragraph. I understand now that I can't undo what I've done. I can only try to be better. Not for your forgiveness or your money, but because I should have been better all along. I'm sorry, Mom. Not because I need something from you, but because you deserved better than the son I've been. I closed the journal and set it aside, feeling neither the warm rush of forgiveness nor the vindictive satisfaction I might have expected. Just a quiet acknowledgement that Stephen might finally be facing the person he had become. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. But it was something. A small crack in the edifice of entitlement he'd built around himself. I turned out the light and slept dreamlessly, at peace with the boundaries I'd established and the woman I'd become. Tomorrow would bring another day of the life I'd chosen for myself. A life that no longer revolved around cleaning up someone else's messes or sacrificing my needs for theirs. It was a good life. My life. Finally. Winter settled over Chicago, coating the city in snow and ice. From my condo windows, Lake Michigan looked like a vast, frozen tundra, beautiful and unforgiving. I'd come to appreciate the symbolism, how something could be both breathtaking and dangerous, inviting yet ultimately inhospitable. I hadn't responded to Stephen's journal, not because I hadn't read it, I had several times, but because I wasn't ready to give him what he wanted. Acknowledgement, connection, the reassurance that no matter how deeply he cut me, I would eventually heal enough to let him close again. Life had settled into a pleasant rhythm. My position at the marketing firm had expanded to include mentoring younger women, many of whom reminded me of myself decades ago. Bright, ambitious, but uncertain of their own worth. I taught them what had taken me 58 years to learn, that their value wasn't measured by what they gave to others, but by the boundaries they maintained for themselves. I'd even begun dating again. Nothing serious, just occasional dinners with a retired architect named Thomas, who made me laugh and never once asked why I didn't have photos of my son in my home. It was during one such dinner, at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, that fate decided to intervene. Clara? I looked up from my risotto to find Julia standing beside our table, her hand intertwined with a man's, not Stephen, but someone new. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in the scene. Me in a black dress I'd bought specifically because it made me feel beautiful, not because it was on clearance. Thomas in his tailored blazer, the half-empty bottle of wine between us. Julia, I acknowledged, keeping my voice neutral. How are you? I'm good, she replied, clearly thrown by the encounter. She gestured to the man beside her. This is David, my fiancé. I nodded politely to David, noting the large diamond on Julia's left hand. Clearly, she'd moved on quickly from whatever relationship she'd had with Stephen. I wondered if my son knew. This is Thomas, I said, introducing my companion. The men exchanged pleasantries while Julia stared at me with barely concealed curiosity. You look different, she finally said. I smiled. I am different. An awkward silence fell. Thomas, sensing tension, tactfully excused himself to use the restroom, while David offered to get Julia another drink from the bar. Once we were alone, Julia leaned closer. Have you spoken to Stephen at all? No, I replied simply. I received his journal but haven't responded. She nodded slowly. He told me he sent it. He wasn't sure you'd even open it. I read it, I said, taking a sip of my wine. Several times. Julia shifted uncomfortably. He's changed, you know. After everything, he's different. I imagine he is. He works 2 jobs now, the call center during the day and bartending at night. He's saving up to go back to school, for teaching, if you can believe it. Says he wants to do something meaningful with his life. I absorbed this information without visible reaction, though something inside me registered a faint surprise. Stephen had always dismissed teaching as underpaid drudgery. Are you still in touch with him? I asked, genuinely curious. Julia hesitated. Not really. We broke up about a month after. Everything happened. But we have mutual friends. I hear things. "And you're engaged now," I observed, nodding toward her ring. "Congratulations." She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "David and I were friends in college. We reconnected after Stephen and I ended things." I studied her face. Young, beautiful, slightly guilty. "You don't owe me explanations, Julia." "I know," she said quickly. "It's just, I feel bad about how everything went down. Not just between you and Stephen, but I wasn't very nice to you on the phone that day." "You were protecting someone you cared about," I replied. "That's natural." Julia glanced toward the bar, where David was waiting for the bartender's attention. "Can I ask you something? Off the record?" I nodded. "Do you ever miss him?" "Stephen, I mean." The question caught me off guard, not because it was unexpected, but because I'd never fully articulated the answer, even to myself. "I miss who I thought he was," I said finally. "The son I believed I had. But that person never existed except in my imagination." Julia considered this. "That's harsh." "It's honest," I corrected. "And at my age, honesty is more valuable than comfortable illusions." She looked like she wanted to say more, but David returned with her drink, and Thomas rejoined our table moments later. Julia and David said their goodbyes, and I watched them walk away, her head tilted toward his shoulder, his hand protectively at her waist. Young love, unburdened by decades of disappointment. That night, after Thomas dropped me at my door with a gentle kiss and a promise to call tomorrow, I stood at my window watching snowflakes dance in the glow of streetlights. Julia's question echoed in my mind. "Do you ever miss him?" The truth was more complicated than what I'd told her. I didn't miss the entitled young man who had mocked me to his friends. But sometimes, in quiet moments, I missed the little boy who had once looked at me like I hung the moon. The child who had drawn pictures of the two of us holding hands, Mom and me, scrawled in crayon across the top. That child was gone, transformed by years of indulgence into someone unrecognizable. Or perhaps he had never truly existed. Perhaps I had simply seen what I needed to see to justify my endless sacrifices. Either way, what remained was a stranger with my son's face. A stranger who had only begun to reckon with his actions when those actions finally came with a cost. Spring arrived with its particular brand of Chicago uncertainty. 60 degrees one day, snowing the next. The marketing firm had promoted me to creative director, a position that came with both a substantial raise and additional responsibility. I thrived on the challenge, discovering creative abilities I'd suppressed for decades while focusing on being a mother first, an employee second, and a woman with her own dreams last, if at all. It was the first truly warm day in April when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mrs. Wilson?" a hesitant male voice asked. "This is Dr. Carter from Northwestern Memorial Hospital. I'm calling about your son, Stephen Wilson." My heart constricted painfully despite my best efforts at detachment. "What's happened?" "He's been admitted with pneumonia. It's quite serious. He's in the ICU." The doctor paused. "He listed you as his emergency contact." Of course he had. Despite everything, he still reached for me in crisis. The predictability of it should have angered me, but I felt only a hollow resignation. "I see," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What does that mean exactly? What are you expecting from me?" The doctor seemed taken aback by my directness. "Well, nothing specific. We just wanted to inform you of his condition. He's stabilized now, but he was quite ill when he came in. Apparently he'd been sick for weeks but couldn't afford to take time off work." The irony wasn't lost on me. Stephen, who had once manipulated me for money to buy luxury watches while claiming it was for textbooks, now couldn't afford basic health care. The consequences of his actions had come full circle. "Thank you for letting me know," I said neutrally. "Is there anything else?" "He's asked for you," the doctor added. "Several times, actually, in his more lucid moments." I closed my eyes briefly. "I understand. Thank you, doctor." After hanging up, I sat motionless at my kitchen counter, staring at nothing. The easy response would be to rush to the hospital, to fall back into the familiar pattern of maternal concern, to let Stephen's illness erase the bright line I'd drawn between his actions and my life. But that would undo months of painful growth. It would signal that all he needed to regain access to my emotional and financial resources was a crisis, real or manufactured. I poured myself a glass of water and considered what I truly owed him in this moment. Not forgiveness. He hadn't earned that yet. Not money. His healthcare was his responsibility now. But perhaps acknowledgement. The basic human connection that exists between two people with shared history, regardless of hurt. After careful consideration, I sent a simple text message to the number the doctor had called from. Please tell Stephen that I've been informed of his condition. I wish him a full recovery. No promises to visit, no offers of help. Just acknowledgement that I knew, and that on the most basic human level, I didn't wish him ill. 2 days later, a nurse called to inform me that Stephen was improving and would likely be discharged by the end of the week. I thanked her for the update and ended the call, feeling neither relief nor disappointment, just a quiet certainty that I had responded appropriately, not as the self-sacrificing mother I once was, but as the woman I had become. The following Monday, a letter arrived at my condo. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Mom, the hospital told me they contacted you. Thank you for responding, even in that small way. I know you don't owe me anything. Being sick like this, really sick, not college kid sick, made me think about all the times you took care of me growing up. All the fevers you brought down, all the soup you made, all the nights you stayed up watching me breathe. I never once worried about whether you'd be there. It was a given. You were always there. I understand now that I took that for granted. I took you for granted. I'm not asking for your forgiveness or your help. I managed to get through this on my own, and that's something I needed to learn how to do. But I wanted you to know that I think about you every day. Not because I need something, but because I miss you. I miss the person who always believed I could be better than I was. Maybe someday I'll be worthy of that belief again. Take care of yourself, Stephen. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer of my bedside table. Not prominently displayed, not thrown away, just acknowledged and stored away, like the complicated feelings it stirred. That night, as I stood on my balcony watching the city lights reflect on the lake, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps its distant cousin. Perspective. Stephen was learning the lessons I'd failed to teach him. He was facing the consequences I'd shielded him from for too long. He was becoming, perhaps, someone who might eventually understand the depth of his actions. I wouldn't reach out. I wouldn't offer reconciliation. That door remained closed until he proved, through sustained action, not convenient words, that he truly understood the value of respect, of gratitude, of seeing others as fully human rather than merely functional. But I allowed myself, for the first time, to imagine a future where such proof might exist. A future where the son I raised might become the man I'd hoped he would be, not for my sake, but for his own. It wasn't hope exactly, just acknowledgement that people can change when change becomes their only option. And I had given him that option. The greatest gift a mother could offer a child who had lost his way. The gift of consequence.